Go on then. Let's talk about Charles Leclerc because again, it felt like a typical Charles Leclerc weekend. It was mistake laden. Like he was spinning the car, and then all of a sudden in the race he comes alive and holds off Lando for as near as it makes no difference. The race end tyre. Talk to me about Charles Leclerc's performance. Did you think, Peter, that he was a worthy driver of the day performance?
Absolutely. Well, I'm not a fan of these driver of the day performances because how could Max not be driver of the weekend, driver of the day, driver of the lap, driver of the minute? He was. But yeah, Charles was superb yesterday. It all changed for Charles in Q3 with the wind, which a lot of drivers complained about. And the more it seemed like the more they took away the downforce from the back of the Ferrari and the more unstable they made the rear, the better Charles got because suddenly he had a front end he could drive with. Yeah, he can. The rear was all over the place. I think that spin coming out of the last corner was, I don't know, was it cold tires? Not cold, but the tires went fully up to temperature. It didn't look like a sort of a proper spin at high speed, did it? Or on the limit. To me, it didn't anyway. But yeah, throw the variables at Charles, take away some of the rear downforce, give him a front end again, which he hadn't had all weekend, and all of a sudden he's going to be mighty. He was unbelievably quick through turns 3, 4, and 5, and I thought, wow, this is Charles Leclerc again. You know, that was a brilliant qualifying performance. And from there, it was, I mean, he knew that it was going to be he was going to be struggling to beat George Russell probably, unless he did something a little bit different. And I really applaud the team and Charles for doing that, going on the soft, because there wasn't a lot of downside. Unlike Max's absurd choice in Singapore, there was virtually no downside because it was so closely matched to the medium. And the upside was, back into the race when he could be fighting with other drivers, he was going to be on the medium and not having to worry about the soft. So, and it was fairly logical that he would try and get some decent grip off the line as well. And it all worked for him. It worked perfectly for him. And my only slight, the only thing that confused me a little bit was why his tires went off so much at the back end of the race. But then again, it just showed how bad the Ferrari was really and how good the McLaren was. And for him to have led Lando for so many laps was just outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. And again, it's a different sort of concentration. Max's concentration on an empty track is one thing. If you're Charles Leclerc and you've got this guy with this big DRS effect behind in a very good car, to be as good as to be as pin sharp as he was under braking and positioning the car was another case study on how to do it. I've always said this guy is right up there with Max in terms of his physical talent. Very different approach to racing, different emotionally, different backgrounds, everything else. But in terms of his physical talent, he's somewhere near Max. And that we saw that yesterday. It was just wonderful to see.
What's the move then? If you're head of Team Leclerc, Peter, going into 2026 and shortly thereafter 27, what's the play? Do you extend more patience to Scuderia Ferrari, notwithstanding the fact that they keep underperforming, that they don't give either one of Lewis or Charles the car that they need and their talents deserve? Or do you look to pastures and you potentially Aston Martin, potentially Mercedes or Red Bull? Do you think it's time for Charles to stop with the I want to win a championship with Ferrari and just focus on winning a championship full stop?
I don't think if he says, I want to win a championship with Ferrari, it's only because it's his current team. But the reality is he wants to win a championship. He wants to win a bunch of championships. He doesn't care which car he's in. But as I said before, where else could he have gone all these years apart from staying where he is? And there is nowhere else that he could have gone. And I've said before, 26, nobody knows what's going to be the situation. But absolutely, without any doubt at all, he'll be on everybody's shopping list. So if the Ferrari is a terrible car and it's getting blown away and it's more or less the same as this year's season, he will have 4 or 5 teams all offering him drives for 27. No doubt about that. And if one of them is a good team with a good, good engine, everything, good chassis, he will go there for sure. I don't think he's got any loyalty to winning for Ferrari. Of course, he'd love to win for all the people that have been around him for so long. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that if at the end of 26, for whatever reason, Mercedes offer him a drive or Red Bull offer him a drive, he's going to take it. No doubt. Why wouldn't he? He wants to win. And I'd love to see him in a winning car consistently. Well, we've seen him in a winning car before, and he's a joy to watch. and it will be again. And it was interesting, wasn't it, when Lewis looked good on the Friday and pretty good Saturday-ish, but as qualifying developed with the win being a factor, Lewis wasn't quite there with Charles. Charles went a little bit deeper. Although Lewis was very quick through those fast S's, got to give him credit for that. But there were little areas where Charles was still getting in a little bit earlier, using the front a little bit better than Lewis. And then in the race, the back end of the race, you would have thought Lewis was going to be strong, but he wasn't. He went away and had quite a disappointing second half of the race, didn't he, on the medium tire? And that was sorry, on the soft tire. And that was, I don't know what that was. I can only assume that the car was a bit pointy for Lewis now in those conditions. And don't forget, the wind changed from Saturday to Sunday, and maybe that worked for Charles in terms of giving him more front end, and maybe that's what Lewis didn't like.
Go on then, Peter, since you bring up Sir Lewis Hamilton's name. Again, this is a tale of two cities as far as the community's opinion. Some will say that Lewis is, in terms of absolute speed, that he's never been closer season to date than he is now versus Charles. That earlier on in the season, it was the gap between them was routinely like 2 to 3 tenths. Now in qualifying, it's like it's less, it's a tenth or less, and that Lewis is now playing his way into the Scuderia Ferrari crease. However, some are saying that this is, he's a million miles away in the driver's standings, isn't he? It's like, well, there you go, 50 points now is the delta. And if Sir Lewis is the fire-breathing dragon Sir Lewis, the 2007, 2008 Sir Lewis, I don't think the points gap would be anywhere near 50 points between him and Charles. What do you think? How do you characterise this first season for Sir Lewis at the Scuderia?
Very difficult, and a very difficult car to drive for Lewis, for sure. And I think, it's no doubt Lewis has been nearer to Charles since Zandvoort, really. But conversely, the car hasn't been very good. And I come back to my point. When you dumb down the rear and you make it more stable, then all of a sudden you neutralize the car, you take away some of the front end, and Charles isn't able to be Charles Leclerc and drive the car that really only he can drive. It becomes a more balanced car, but the grip level comes down, and the Ferrari isn't a quick car. So yes, Lewis is nearer to Charles, but how near is he to Charles when he's got a really pointy car to drive with an unstable rear? I don't believe he's much nearer than he was at the start of the year, because that's something that Lewis doesn't like to drive with anymore. He never really, if you think about it, he never really had to drive like that at Mercedes until 2022, and then George Russell was all over him. Not all over him, but pretty much the same as the Charles thing. And so that's where we're at. I think it's difficult for Charles because he basically has to say, I want a front end above all. I don't really care about the rear. And he knows that Lewis is going to say, no, we got to have a rear because we need it for this, time management, whatever Lewis is going to say. And so you get into this sort of thing in the debrief of where they're going to go with the car. And Charles been around Ferrari long enough to know that the one thing you don't want to do is start splitting the garage too much, because then it's a real bottomless pit. And so it's a difficult act to have to balance. And I think wasn't John Elkann, I don't know, he's got some award or something at the weekend, and he was saying, we must be united as a team and win together. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything at all. Everybody's united as a team. Everybody wants to win. Come on, say something positive. If he'd said something like, I'm here in New York getting this award, and I got to say that I love the Ferrari when it's got a really pointy front end. And if Lewis can't drive with the rear unstable, he needs to learn how to do it. Let's go, Charles. I'd be quite impressed, But it wasn't. It was one of these platitudinal, let's all work together as a team rubbish. And anyway, I just say that as an aside because it doesn't help, does it? And so, yeah, I think what Charles got to do is try to make sure he's got a car that's very sharp, very knife edgy to drive, knowing that he can do that. He will have a few moments, he'll have a few spins and a few offs, but when he gets it right, he will be unbelievably quick still. Whereas Lewis is looking for a car that's going to be a little bit more forgiving and a little bit more balanced and allow him to do all the things that he does really well in terms of track craft and setup and prediction of where the tires are going to go. He's really good at all that. But driving a difficult, unstable car on a knife-edgy limit, that's not. I don't think that's what gets Lewis out of bed anymore. And that's the difference. Dumb down the car, Lewis is going to be right there with Charles, maybe even quicker, because Charles will just lose interest.